Welcome to Undercomplicating Stuff, where we, two psychologists and coaches with over 40 years of combined experience, share our insights to help undercomplicate important topics. A friendly reminder that this video is meant for conversational and entertainment purposes only. Please see the information section of this video for additional resources. Dr. Gedeon, introduce yourself.
Thanks, Julie. I'm Stacey Gedeon. I'm a health psychologist and the founder and CEO of a healthcare consulting and professional coaching business. And how about you, Dr. Radico?
I'm Julie Radico. I am a psychologist, a coach, an author, and a speaker. And today our question is, what qualifies as self-care? And so there's a ton of things that we could look at and read online that people can find related to self-care. And I am mindful that as we talk about like what qualifies, like there's so many ways to think about like how do you define what self-care is? How do you know what self-care isn't? How do you allow yourself to engage in self-care? How do you really not judge yourself for resting and doing self-care? And so I'm excited for us to dig into some of these questions related to like what qualifies as self-care.
I love this question as well. And it comes up quite often in social settings, in social media, with our clients all the time. And like you said, there's different ways to define it and different things it could mean for different people. And we want to emphasize that we are talking about the individual. And so what your partner, friend, coworker might find as a good self-care option, you may detest, or that may be exhausting for you. And so one way to frame it is to think about what are the activities, and that's a broad term on purpose, what are the activities that when you're engaging in them or afterwards, you feel recharged, restored, sort of emotionally regulated, and it kind of fills your tank, fills your batteries, or whatever metaphor you want to use, with the caveat, and we've said this in other videos, that it's not something that's harmful to either yourself or others. And so if you can kind of create a toolbox or a toolkit of some ideas, for one person, it might be listening to music. For somebody else, it might be getting really engaged socially in some sort of event or activity. And for other people, it may be really zoning out and watching TV and taking that time to rest and recharge. So one thing you can do to sort of gauge, is this something that really fills me up? Would be, okay, afterwards, do I feel more grounded? Do I feel lighter? Am I less overwhelmed? And those can be indicators of activities that, okay, I'm going to kind of tuck this away and know that this is something that I can pull from in the future and when needed. I am aware of, though, and I want your take on this. What about when people say, I'm just too busy? Like, self-care would be great. I'd really like somebody to take care of me, but okay, right, self-care, I hear about it. We all need to do it. What if I have such a job and things after work that I'm just not able to carve out some big, 2-hour yoga exercise session? What do you say to people who have that going on?
So this is a beautiful point that you bring up related to a couple of things that are sparking for me here. Like finding time for self-care can sometimes feel like more of a burden and makes us push the self-care off of our plate. Sometimes it's because we devalue the importance of self-care and don't recognize like how important that is for us to really be engaging in regularly to help us be doing the full-time work. You're drained and you're then saying like, well, I need to stay extra hours at work because it's taking me longer to get this done. Well, I wonder if you had taken some time to do self-care, you might have been able to focus more or had more energy. So there are realities that we all live with that we could sit here and say like, yeah, Julie, it would be great if I had all this time to go to a yoga class or, read a book or do something that would refill my cup so that I could have more energy at work. That's pie in the sky thinking and not something that I normally get. Maybe I get like the opportunity 1 or 2 times a week or a month, and then I'm so drained that I can't do all the things. And I might encourage people to think creatively. Make a list of all of the things that you find rejuvenating for your self-care. Like, what are the things that actually refuel you, which might be different than things that we have said in this video or that you might hear from others. So I will just say, I think yoga is like a great thing people do for themselves. But if you were like, Julie, the only way you're allowed to do self-care is yoga, I would be like, okay, like great. Like I'm not anti-yoga, but I'm not like all about yoga. Like, uh, and that doesn't mean that it's not really helpful and healthy for other people to do. It just means it's not my mode of self-care. So if you were like, oh, create a better option for yourself, like some time to really thoughtfully list out what are the self-care things that are really actually helpful and refueling for you. And then consider putting them in a rotation. If you get 2 hours a month and you know that there's 5 things that you like to do for your self-care, there are 5 things that refuel you. And one of them is cuddling with your dog on the couch. Great, that's on the list. Another one is watching one of your favorite shows. Great. Another one is reading a book. Great. If you're like, I want to do those all day, every day, I don't have the time, and I get this like 2 hour window, well, having those available to you that you've already done the thoughtful work of these are the things that refuel me, these are my self care, and like having that at the ready to then say, okay, well, here's my menu. I'm going to pull one of these. And even if I can't do all of them, or I can only do this for a short amount of time, I know that this refuels me. I know that this feels healthy for me. I'm going to do that thing. And maybe then you put them in a rotation where, like, the next time you have that free time, you get 15 minutes to do something. That's when you then, maybe you picked starting to read a book, and then the next time you cuddle your pup, like making it so that it feels like you actually are getting chances to do your self-care. Prioritize scheduling space in your calendar and protecting space in your calendar for self-care in the same way you would like a medical appointment or a really important meeting. And so, like, we don't have the power to say, oh, schedule self-care instead of that important meeting, right? Like, you need to go to that meeting, you need to go to those medical appointments. But I find that people will often say, oh, yeah, you know what? I had scheduled some time for me to do this really good self-care thing that I know is helpful for me. But something came up, and so I just, crossed it off the calendar, put something else in there. Protect your self-care time in the same way you would protect a meeting or a medical appointment. Like that is as valuable and as important as those other things.
I love those points. And I just had a conversation with somebody this past week who did exactly what you said. Always there are things going on and things pop up. And assuming it's not an emergency or something that's very otherwise important or urgent or non-movable, the self-care sort of is the first thing to tick off the list. Okay, I'll do that tomorrow, or I'll do it next week, or whatever it might be. And it is really important to make it a non-negotiable. And 15 minutes, we're not talking about hours and hours and hours. Start small, make it manageable, make it doable. Some other tips that you got me thinking about were, am I focusing on what I think I should be doing? And you and I are going to have another video about shoulds. But if it feels like it is an assignment that's not pleasant, or you start to feel guilty, we hear this a lot too, where people will say, well, I feel really guilty if I do it. And on the flip side, if I don't do it, now I feel guilty. So you might get people that exercise is really something that fuels them. And maybe they struggle with guilt for taking time to do that. And at the same time, double whammy, they feel guilty if they don't do it. So kind of knowing yourself and realizing what comes up. Another tip I think is really helpful to know if something fuels you or it feels like a should is asking yourself, am I doing this for the outcome or the experience? And that kind of ties into mindfulness as well. If you're doing something to race through it to get to the end, probably not super recharging, probably not very mindful because your brain is kind of going ahead and you're not in the moment. So that can be another way to categorize is this filling me up? Is it draining? And we haven't mentioned that some things are just neutral, and that's okay. But really finding those couple of handful of things that consistently are accessible and able to add to your energy bank so that you can continue on with the day. And you may need to be more flexible. You may need to experiment with different things. So try things out. If you feel like, well, I don't know what self-care would be or what activities would feel me, okay, try something new. Maybe challenge yourself to do something new a month, take a class, do something else that you've not done before to learn whether it fuels you or drains you.
As you explore, as you consider what are the self-care things that I'm already doing that really do refuel me, and what are the ones that, oh, maybe they're neutral or they're draining. Like they're things I'm supposed to do, and I feel really guilty if I don't, but they're not actually refueling for me. Be mindful not to fall into the comparison trap. The, oh, well, yoga's supposed to be such a good self-care thing. Like, why wouldn't you love yoga? Why wouldn't you do that? It's such a healthy thing. Like, I'm not here to argue. Like, right? Like, it is it is just an awareness that you're growing for yourself, that you got to find what works for you. So trying to like force something to feel like it's self-care and refueling when it's not hitting the mark for you, like that's not helping you. Also, comparing yourself that, oh, I we hear this all the time in like coaching or therapy. Like people will say, oh, well, my self-care is video games, or I like anime, or I color, or I like, and it's kind of like sometimes said with this, oh, that's not good enough, or that's not yoga. That's not, some running or exercise. Like that's not a legitimate enough type of self-care. You get to decide. As long as it's something that's healthy, like it's not harming you in a way, then you get to decide what feels healthy for you. So trust yourself and value your own opinions without falling into this comparison trap of the messages that we're fed from like big wellness. Wellness is really important. It's great. There's a lot of good stuff out there from the wellness space. There's also a lot of potential judgment comparison traps that you could fall into.
It always kind of cracks me up whenever I see some sort of article or something in the wellness field that says 7 signs to or 3 steps for, it always makes me sort of have a little bit of a skeptical view on sort of what are going to be the 3 things that are going to fix this issue. Another thing I know we've talked about before that people struggle with is the need to feel productive all the time. And maybe having a belief that, well, if I rest, so let's say you have 5 minutes to sit and that's your rest because what you do is on your feet all day. Or maybe you have longer than that and you think, well, but it's not productive. I don't have this outcome that can show how I spent this time. And that again ties back to my point earlier of are you focusing on the experience or the outcome? And that again can be something to sort of remind you like, ooh, that's right. This doesn't need to be productive in the way that I'm creating something that's tangible. It's productive because it fuels me and fills me up, and it's something that we need to do.
People are going to view what you do in whatever way they want to. So as you're talking about this really fantastic point of do what feels healthy for you, what feels creative for you, what feels refueling for you in a way that it doesn't have to be productive. It doesn't have to be for other people. It doesn't have to fit into a mold. Dance the way you want to dance, sing the way you want to sing. Like be creative in the way that feels healthy and good for you, knowing that it doesn't have to be like a sweater that you would then be able to sell, like fall into this trap of you can find a hobby and you could spend like $500 on all the materials for that hobby and realize that it's not something that refuels you or is self-care, or you like the hobby and then you realize, oh, well, now I am in this trap where I feel like I have to monetize it. I feel like I can't do it for self-care. I have to be promoting it on social media and putting it out into the world. And like we can fall into so many traps with this. So I that's what I want to highlight as my takeaway for our time today is that like, the importance of figuring out what self-care feels like for you, what it looks like for you, protecting time to do that, and just knowing it does not have to be productive to anyone else. The hopeful thing that you're taking away from that self-care is, like you're saying, Stacey, the experience of the journey and the refueling type of space. Like the maybe it's just you're not feeling necessarily refueled, but you're feeling rested. You're able to pause, you're able to sit and your self-care might be mindfulness, but in the most basic, you don't have to make it, oh, I have to be really mindful. Like you could just say, my self-care is I'm gonna go sit outside for 10 minutes and just watch the clouds. And that is self-care. And that does not have to be productive. That does not have to pass some sort of test. That doesn't have to compare to anybody else. Figure out what feels healthy for you and try to integrate those things in a way that feels realistic for you.
My key takeaway would be is to think of self-care strategies, habits, activities as things that maintain your well-being every bit as much as nutrition and movement and sleep, that they aren't rewards for doing something else. They really need to be integrated into things as often as one can, and pulling from that variety of things that you can do for different time frames and in different situations is really helpful. And think of it as, again, one of these things that we want to maintain and really follow intentionally and regularly.
And maybe we'll do another video on this based on the comments and the questions that we get. Because I agree with you, Stacey. It's such a rich topic that so much junk and judgment gets thrown on top of. Even the fact that like you don't have to be perfect at your self-care. You know, if you're like, oh, my self-care is yoga. Julie, stop knocking it. This is my self-care. Great. You don't have to be the most perfect person at yoga for it to qualify. Like being mindful to not get caught up in these traps. Um, if this resonated with you, and we hope that it did, please share it with somebody that you care about, somebody that you know maybe self-care is an important thing that maybe they're like not prioritizing for themselves, or that you want to share and hope that they can help keep you accountable and you taking care of yourself and saving some time on your calendar. You know, it's always great to have accountability partners. So please share this with somebody that you care about. Also, please comment, like, subscribe, and feel free to message us on our social media platforms with questions that you'd like us to discuss in future episodes.